Welcome to the Rest Round with Butch, Hiles, and Gary Hashman.
All right, guys. So back here with the Rest Round, Gary Hashman, Butch, Hiles, and today we have Keaton here. So he's one of my favorite people. So I think today will be good because really I'd like to talk to you as I do anyway, but now on a more official thing because what we were talking about before we started recording was I have this never-ending thirst for other people that run classes. I want to know what you guys are doing and what the in thing is, if things are changing, and of course just to get better ideals and always tweak things. I think things constantly evolve and change, but some is confirmation. I like to always know that I'm on the right track, maybe, and then even if I'm not, I like to know if, like, all of a sudden, like, for example, if all of a sudden you're like, man, I've been doing this lately and it's really kind of struck a chord with everybody, and our classes are like double the size, right? Or something like that. So yeah, anyway, we'll get into that a little bit, but let's talk. Go ahead. For anybody that don't know you, let's just give a little quick background if you don't care, and then we'll kind of just jump into things.
Yeah, so my name's Keaton. I started training the day before my first college lecture. So I moved up to Morgantown, and I've started at Ground Zero Fighting Systems, been at Ground Zero Fighting Systems the whole time. I got my purple belt few months ago, a little over 2 years of training. I'm a junior at WU in secondary education. And one of the more interesting things that I do with training is I've been teaching, honestly, probably close to a majority of the time I've been doing jiu-jitsu. I study quite a bit and I travel a lot to train, short training trips, just to gyms that I hear have good looks, and I take pretty deliberate notes on those trips. So.
What I mean, and when you say you're out kind of finding it sounds like the same thing that I'm looking for, but you're doing it, the old fashioned way of actually going, like the real stuff. So, have you found anything on these travels that kind of changed your mind, or is it more like we were talking about, like, you're on the right track? Or I guess, I know that there's going to be certain things, but I guess the other thing would be too, does it matter if the person's quote unquote famous or not? I mean, what are you finding in all these gyms that you're?
Yeah, so every high level gym that I visit has always given me a different perspective on there always seems to be a meta at a given gym that they're very, very talented at. Like, I went to Alliance headquarters in Atlanta, and I just got put in lapel de la Hiva and swept like 100 times. I was like, okay, I don't know what to do about this. When I was training at Pedigo submission fighting, the tenacity and competitive sharpness of those guys was very special. B team, I'm always amazed at their hand fighting from all positions. Like, it's just exhausting to even stand with them, like, because they're just arm dragging, posting on the shoulder, messing with your head repeatedly, cycling, and their back attacks also. But that being said, I do set up long-term projects for myself to develop skills. And each time I visit somewhere, I tend to do a lot better in the respects I've been working on. And specifically at Ground Zero, like, a thing we're quite good at is we have a lot of people with very good butterfly guards and a lot of people with good leg locks and leg lock defense. So I basically I never go anywhere and like get leg locked a bunch of times. That doesn't really happen to me. I never go anywhere and can't sweep people my weight and belt level. But the interesting thing is, even at gyms like B team, there are levels, and you roll with the professionals. Like, I'm quite tall, so for some reason, like, in Nicky Rod's mind, he sees me and he's like, oh, that's a big guy too, and he's got 30 pounds on me, and just wrecks me. Like, I can't do anything to him legitimately. And there's a few other guys there like that, but then there's like step down, like this guy's placing at colored belt IBJJF, like he's gonna mess me up, but I can give him looks, and then people I can beat up. So yeah, it does. You do realize there's a reason why certain guys are so famous and successful, and it normally has to do with having a few skills that they're amazing at and really good, like they're very game, they're very competitively sharp. I don't know how best to put that into words, but they express their physical attributes in a fashion that just wrecks me. They're quite quick and strong.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, right? So are you catching these guys when they're training for competition? Like, for example, if we're talking B team or Donahur's guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
They cycle the training up and down, right? Meaning because you can't train 100% all the time or you're going to be injured, correct? So
yeah,
in essence, then if you're at the professional training on those days, how often are you going hard versus how often are you positional sparring, going over moves? Again, I know you're only in there a certain amount of times, but from what you can ascertain from even there.
yeah. So I actually have a pretty good reference for this, because the first time I was there at B team for a week was my spring break, which was 2 weeks out from ADCC trials. So those guys are going crazy at this time, right? It's like their last real training week before trials. That was basically, normal class structure stays the same. 30 to 45 minutes of instruction, 3 positional rounds, 3 open rounds. But the pros getting ready were just doing 6 straight ADCC rules rounds, competition speed. And then the last time I was there, it was more, which was a month ago, was a lot more relaxed, a lot more learning focused. Like a lot of the high level guys off in a corner tinkering on a given technique together. Like a lot of the times, Craig has a few training partners he trains with every day. Craig Jones, that is, would just roll with his guys and then get on out. From trials, it seemed a lot more like, the guy's getting ready for trials. We're looking to just beat up everybody in the room, which I think is a good thing, by the way. They should be doing that for sure.
Well, and I've said that even though it was just competing locally, I never did really anything high level. I did fight to win and stuff like that. That's about as high as I got. But when I was competing regularly, I've always said that when I was getting ready for a competition, I'm probably not a good guy to be with.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not nice. I'm not. All my jiu-jitsu is I called it selfish jiu-jitsu, because I was there just to get myself ready. And I would hope that the people who were training with me knew that, and that they were trying to get ready for competition too. But like when it comes, when competition's coming up and we're getting ready for something, we got to be ready for it, which, means you got to step all the level up. And I want to train. I'm sure you do this too, but I wanted to train the way I wanted to compete. And that means winning.
Yeah, it does. I definitely have a lot of those bad feelings about myself. The 2 weeks out from a comp, I'm like, I'm just gonna have to go in today and beat everybody up. And that is what it is. And we're still friends after. But there is a certain tenacity that you have to attack with, and you can't. Once you're around the game long enough, you learn to never take that stuff personal, I feel like.
Shouldn't. It's hard, right? Like if you guys, and if people are around a lot, because I think one thing that I've noticed too is that there's just constant explanation that's needed in the gym, right? Because sometimes you could think to yourself, like myself, I could be like, well, I've already said this, but it doesn't mean I've said it to everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes I'm guilty of that. Even when we're going over moves, I'm like, everybody knows this move. And then truthfully, they don't. Right. So I need to go over stuff a little bit more, meaning, especially that, like I maybe it's laziness. I find myself not wanting to repeat myself all the time, but I need to. I guess part of training, like you're going to have to say, like, I'm probably have to just say, hey, forgive me. I know I said this 10,000 times, but here we are again. Right. And
and I've had that. The problem is that you have regular students who come in, and those regular students are the ones that you're apologizing to, because they're there 4 to 5 nights a week. And it's the guy who comes in. You have also those guys that are scattered that come in 1 to 2 nights a week, and maybe you didn't say it to them, and you feel obligated to say it to them so they don't get thrown around and tossed on their teeth. you know, and but then you're like, God, these guys have got to be sick of hearing me say the same shit every single day, because
Yeah.
I'm sick of saying it.
Yeah.
I have a like little speech I give at the end of each class. Like, just talk with your partner and modulate intensity of the training round. Like, not everybody's looking for the same thing tonight, and hopefully, and this is the case at Ground Zero on a nightly basis, there's enough bodies that you can find the hard rounds or the more slower technical rounds, depending on what you need that night.
Yeah, we find that too. That's what I'm kind of and you know, from being at our gym a lot, Lee, too, you know, I don't have a ton of adults that compete, you know, like a couple really. And so, you know, more so our kids program competes a lot, but it's gotten to where, you know, we've got, let's say 3 or 4 guys that compete all the time, but then, you know, the next 20, 30, 40 don't, right? And then those 3 or 4 guys, I can tell, I see the frustration on their face sometimes, because it's like, we'll do the techniques portion, and then when it's time to actually roll or even positional, most of the guys will do the positional stuff, but when it's time to roll, like those guys will pack up and go, right? And it's because you got 2 different mindsets. Like some of those guys, they're perfectly happy, you know, because they work 9 to 5, just doing technique. They enjoy jiu-jitsu. They have fun kind of rolling about 50% with their friends. And I've made a change. Like, used to be where I was like, hey, you with him, you with him, you with him. But that was for the guys that were competing, right? So I was giving them different looks. I toned that down quite a bit, because for the guys that aren't competing, like, there's a certain thing they're looking for, and that might be just with their buddy, you know? So I'll say, hey, for everybody that wants to switch, go ahead and switch. For the guys that don't want to, you don't have to. And that was a big change for me, because I felt like I just needed to do that every time. But then I had to reevaluate. I'm like, look, the guys that are quote unquote hobbyists, they don't care, right? Like I know that it'll make them better, and they know probably that make them better, but they also want to have fun, right? And I think they have a little insecurity sometimes with bringing in a new person that they haven't trained with, even though it's their friend in the gym, because, you know, they don't want to go that hard. That's not what they're looking for tonight, right? And it's tough to keep both of those people happy, because at the same time, it happened the other night where everybody kind of took off. And I had about my 2 guys that compete were the only 2 left, right? And I felt bad for them. So I was like, hey man, we'll roll, you know, I'll just go with you guys for like the rest of the time. And we did, but it was because I saw that look of disappointment on their face, like, God damn it, like, it's my time and everybody's leaving, right? And sometimes it's, you know, for a gym like ours too, where again, it's not heavy on the competition, it's hard to navigate through that. And it's hard for everybody to understand. So it almost goes back to the same thing I was saying before. I have to have those constant conversations like, hey, these guys, because that's the other thing is, like, some of the guys that are competing, they'll see a guy wearing a brown belt that doesn't compete anymore, but they want to go with that brown belt because they want to test themselves. And I'll have to say, hey, like, he don't really roll with people anymore. Like, he's doing something different, or this guy's, you know, I gotta let them know what that guy's goals are. They're not the same. They don't want to go, like, I know that you're going to go with that guy to test your stuff. He's not going to do that. He'll just roll over right now because it don't care that way, right? And it's difficult, right? Like, and that kind of goes to what I'm saying here is finding that balance and keeping everybody happy, because it's harder, right? Like, if I'm only have 4 competitors, the truth is, if I cater to just them, then my 30 or 40 guys are going to be miserable, right? But I also have these guys that I can't punish for competing, because that's what you kind of should do, right? Like, you know what I mean? So it's kind of keeping them separate. So what we've done is we have a competition day, right? Tuesday and Thursday. Those guys get together, and that's kind of, you know, it's not earth shattering, but that's what we had to do, have a competition class. They still come to the regular classes. They just know, like, hey man, like, just dial it back 2 or 3 notches on these guys, and you can still get good looks. It's just, they're not going to roll with you if you're getting ready for a tournament, because they're not, right? Like, it's just not, it's complicated, right?
Yeah, well, and I think too is, like, you want people to retain something from class other than I just got my ass thrown in a washing machine, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the big thing with the hobbyists is, and now I consider myself a hobbyist because I don't really compete anymore. And, like, the last thing I want is to, like, do competition rounds when I don't have a competition coming up. Like, it's not in my, kind of like what Butch was saying, but it's really what, like, I want you to retain the information from class. I don't want you to look back on tonight and think, man, all I can remember is that Lee came in and he knocked the shit out of me. I don't want that to be the thought. But in kind of going to retention and taking this, I'm kind of segueing, and sorry, we can always come back, but you had said something that made my ears perk up a little bit. You said you're an obsessive note taker.
Yeah. I take notes on every session.
I am too. Now, I haven't done it so much lately, but anytime I go to any seminars, if I visit a new place, if I see a video, an instructional video, like even though I still have the video, I will obsessively note everything that I see. And like, these are things, these are keys, this hand placement, this, you know, this idea of the push pull, whatever is in that move, I want to document it. And I feel like I have a better time retaining that information if I write it down. Is that kind of the same with you, or is it, how is it that you're taking notes, and what is it with you taking notes that helps you?
So I started off only taking notes on paper and taking notes on like really like almost like a narrative, writing out what happened. Now, especially with instructionals, I clip them, I screen record them and clip them. So like I watch a lot of Danaher's instructionals. He normally explains 3 or 4 times and it gets shorter each time. So, and I don't need all that every time. So I'll clip the last one and then save that to my Google Drive. For a while, I was putting it all on a like private Instagram account so I could go right on my phone to it, but that was just too much hassle. So now I just tote my laptop around everywhere. The one part about like physical on paper note taking that helps me is noticing trends more, like trends in the training room, or like if a good instructor, and you see this, I see this a lot in college too, like if a good instructor is repeating something, they clearly find it very important. So I'll note that thing they're repeating. Like John Danaher, for example, in his sweeps and reversals DVD that I'm watching right now, he just keeps talking about pushing and pulling. Like they're either giving you push reactions or pull reactions. And like I'm every day trying to outline in different positions where I feel that better. So yeah, and also breaking down my own matches, I still take paper notes because I can remember what it was like in my head. But other than that, it's been a huge process. Like I found my notes from a year ago, watching Nikki Ryan's Wrestle Up DVD. And I wrote like 30 pages of just like explaining the technique step by step. So clipping allows me to, I think, cut a lot of the fat off that. And I can just have the 30-second clip and it's a lot easier.
So let's do this too, like, because this goes to the same thing that you just mentioned, Gary. It's like kind of take a step back and really dive into this, meaning that another thing that you said is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said you're only training about 2 years now, right? Or is that correct, Lee?
What is it?
How long have you said you were training now altogether in jiu-jitsu?
2.5 years.
All right, so that's important information. Why? And I don't want to skip over that because, I mean, I would say 6 months to a year ago, you know, you're at the gym and, you know, you're at the gym a lot. And I was like, man, you just like, when are they going to give you some fucking belts, man? And that's when you're like a white belt. Like, we're talking like a year ago. And I was like, this is just ridiculous, man. And we say that like, I'm joking, but serious, right? And the point is, in this small amount of time, 2.5 years, right? Like nobody's going to argue that you're a solid purple belt, right? Like at all, period. And that's important because a lot of times, as soon as somebody says, like, for example, not relatable, but I'm going to say it anyway. I just reposted the Demi Lovato purple belt thing today. People went crazy, which is a lot of times why I post that. I just want interaction. I just post and ghost, you know, like the thing. And I just read the comments and everybody's like, yeah, whatever. Look at her nails. Her nails aren't even messed up. Like there's no way she's been training, whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is like, she's got a similar story to yours, except I know that you train a lot more than she does. And it's a huge accomplishment. So the only way that you're going to get to a purple belt in 2.5 years, and a purple belt that universally every gym's going to be like, dude, that he's awesome, is if you're taking proper steps, right? Like, and that means training, taking notes, and actually working on the things that's making you a better person. Like I joke about it at my gym a lot, is that I say that's why it's good that we have a curriculum, right? So, and I think like people get confused this curriculum all the time, thinking that if they don't follow it, like it's bullshit and they don't need to follow, stuff like that. But it's like, no, I'm giving you a roadmap to get there, where if you don't have this roadmap, you could be lucky like Lee and get there in 2.5 years, or you could be studying Eddie Bravo shit that's not going to do anything for you. And I'm not saying his stuff's bad, but a lot of people do it because they're like the name crackhead controller, baby wipe, and all this other stuff. And I'm like, you don't even know how to pass guard yet, but you're doing all this mission control and rubber guard. And I'm like, so you've wasted all this time. You know what I mean? Like, so how did you stay on track? What could you say that's the key to your development in these 2.5 years? I mean, because that's important, I think.
Yeah. So first of all, anybody who sees like a female celebrity get belted and their first reaction is to like be angry is like probably a loser. like that's a cool thing. You know what I mean? Like that's cool. Just because she may enjoy it differently than I do. Like I don't it's not, that person's probably just a loser. And second of all, Eddie Bravo is great, has a great like control-based game, but people just see like the 10th iteration of it and they're like, okay, it's time to run with it. Like like Eddie would tell you there's like 3 things to do before you ever try to go plata somebody. Like there's the carny, the omoplata, and the triangle from like a lot of the spots you can hit the go plata, which are stronger submissions. But yet, insofar as my development, I think focusing very heavily on a few skills for sort of long periods of time. So I attended a seminar at the end of it was November of 2021. I believe. So I was in Philadelphia at Josh Vogel's gym, the Jiu-Jitsu company, and this guy, very sharp. I still talk to him fairly often. And it was on setting up projects for yourself. And I was already kind of doing this. It just gave me a lot of the explicit language. So basically, I take 6 to 10 week blocks, and I'm working on 2 skills at all times. If you have less time to train, I would say just choose one. But if I go past 2, it gets super muddled in my head. I will seek out high quality instructional material by just watching who's good at the skills I'm looking to improve at, and then finding their instructionals. And then I watch the instructional normally over the course of like 2 weeks. And from there, we are getting live reps, deliberately practicing. That's the only thing I'm going for, is the big deal. Is that I don't come in and I'm like, okay, time to roll. Like, what does that mean? Like a lot of people do that for 10 years and they don't get any better. So you come in with a like mental representation of what you want the session to be, and then you're only going for that move, throwing caution to the wind, probably getting strangled by white belts often. Things are not going to go great in the first week or so of you doing this move. Like I tried to, Colin finishes a lot of outside heel hooks, Colin Caprini, my coach. I tried to learn like leg pummeling passing, like float passing, like Gordon Ryan. I got leg locked like a dozen times in a 5-minute round. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I want to stick with this. But I stuck with it, and it improved both my leg lock defense and my passing. So the narrowing of focus is the most important thing. And from there, having almost a sort of reverence for the training room. Like normally my phone and my whole bag stays out here in the striking room, and I go back to the mat room. Like nothing is messing with my mental processes. It's like the only really clear time I have in my head. And then you're just taking like a deliberate practice and noting breakdowns in the techniques, and day by day adding nuance to your understanding. that will take you about 80% of the way. The last 20% is actually having like a bit of dog in you, I tell people, and like being willing to really scrap with people on a regular basis. Like, for example, we have a black belt who drops in here from Standard in Baltimore sometimes because I think he has family here. I don't know. When he's here, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get him. I don't. He's very good, but you throw your best things at the best people, and it's very important to over a small amount of time be able to identify the talents of the different people in your training room. Like, it's hard to explain, but you need to be able to look at somebody and see what is great about their jiu-jitsu as it stands now, and then gravitate towards them in rounds and let them get more of those positions than just like dominating them. So I think pulling a step back and realizing you will see a short amount of time where you see a downward trend in your success to inevitably skyrocket upwards is, and just really betting on that day in and out helped me improve very quickly.
What you said sounds like when my daughter would watch the same Barbie dancing princess movie for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And
It's the
so,
same exactly.
well, and that's the thing is like, I've talked about this. Like, I remember when I first started, and not unlike you, I was kind of fast to blue belt, a little bit longer time to get my purple belt than you, but I was kind of on an accelerated track. I was competing a lot. And the one thing that I seen in the training room that I did that other people didn't do was if I got stuck on something, I kind of obsessed about it. I remember the first time I got tapped in a competition was to a north-south choke. Now, I was a white belt. I was supposed to be tapped by a north-south choke eventually. It was supposed to happen. And after it happened, I was like, it's never going to happen again. So I just studied everything I could about north-south, the position, defense, where I need to be in the position, how to get out of that position. And because of that, I got better, even though nobody else was really doing that. The same thing, kind of, I got to a point with my instructor who, when I was a blue belt, was a purple. When I got my purple, he went to brown. It was kind of the same thing. I couldn't pass his guard. I would get the takedown. And if I got the takedown, he would immediately bring me back to his guard. So I was like, man, I need to fix this. I don't know what I'm doing. So I went and I talked to him about it a little bit, and he was like, I don't know, it's my guard. He's like, like trying to teach you how to pass my guard is kind of difficult because I'm not sure I know how to pass it myself. So then I would look at other instructionals. I would talk to other instructors. And then when it came time to do open mats, I would like shake hands with my open mat partner. I'd be like, hey, we got a 5-minute round here for open mat. For the first 2.5 minutes, can I just drill this move for 2.5 minutes? And so for 2.5 minutes, I got to drill whatever I wanted. And then after that, I was like, hey, the next 2.5 minutes is all yours. If you want to drill, you can drill. If you want to roll, we can roll. They would always choose to roll every single time because that's why they're there. It's the fun part. And so I got 2.5 minutes of drilling that nobody else got. And then I got to roll just like everybody else. And I think that's the thing. Like, you have to obsess on your weaknesses and know where your game needs building and then stay there until it gets good. And so I appreciate that I think that is probably the most overlooked thing. It's too easy to go in and do what you're good at all the time, right? If you go in and you do what you're good at, you aren't growing. It's kind of like confirmation bias. You know, if everybody here is victim to my attacks, and I don't do anything to make myself better in anywhere else, then it's always going to be the same thing, the same outcome, and I'm getting the growth out of it. So I appreciate what you're saying. It's definitely the way to grow in jiu-jitsu, and not just grow, but grow fast, is constantly put yourself in bad positions.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's like almost running from the truth, right? So if you want to understand jiu-jitsu truthfully and your own jiu-jitsu truthfully, you'll want to create a pretty comprehensive overview of all the skills, what is my double seated game like? What is my top game? What is my bottom game? What is my standing game? Honestly, 6 months ago, I would be lucky to take down like most middle school wrestlers. Like that would be quite the challenge for me. But you come in, we're lucky enough to have the WVU, BJJ, and MMA club through us. So we get a lot of young guys who've wrestled and are quite athletic. And I'm here teaching class, and I have to be willing to put my ego on the line to get lat dropped by a bunch of 18-year-olds. You know what I mean? And not a lot of people can do that, and that's something you have to garner. And I think once you accept it for a small period of time, a month or less even, you like come to this awakening that like, it doesn't matter. There's people out there who are always going to be able to take me down, and that's okay. So yeah, just putting not having some huge amount of outward pride and just putting it on the line day in and out, I think is very important.
Yeah, well, and I think too, like that's the reason we train. I don't want to lose in competition. I want to lose at home on our mats, right? Because that there, it doesn't mean anything. It means I'm growing, I'm finding my weaknesses. If I'm going to lose, if I'm going to lose a minute, if I'm going to lose a point, if I'm going to lose a match, if I'm going to get submitted, I want it to happen on our home mats. Yeah. I don't want it to happen in competition. And so I think what you said there is the big thing, is like the humbleness, right? It's okay to be in bad positions, and it's okay to be bad at something. It's not okay to not grow.
Yeah, most certainly. And I hate like this like have no ego thing. What you should have an ego about is your ability to address weaknesses and improve quickly. Like if someone ever says that about me, like, oh, he shies away from rolls in the training room, I'm like, all right, we're gonna fight. Like because that's one thing I will never do. You know what I mean? So you have to, every human in existence has an ego of some sort. But it can't be around like for example, if someone starts on bottom and they're smaller than me, I can just body lock them. I can just body lock them, squeeze the shit out of them, pass eventually, and make them super tired. Like that's not really a win at all. Like it's not an expression of jiu-jitsu as an art or pure technique. Like I'm just bigger than them. So you shouldn't have an ego about like, oh, I can body lock past all the blue belts in the gym. You should have an ego about like, they don't think I can learn single legs. I'm going to have the best single legs in the gym 3 months from now. And if that ends up not being true, it's okay. Maybe you have to take the development another direction. But more often than not, you'll end up manifesting that for yourself through your work.
Wonder, so how do you think, I mean, everybody's favorite part of training is the rolling part, right? And I think that's why it's a little rough on people, because at the same time you're trying to, I'm just thinking of our competitors, right? They're always working on stuff too, but that's also the time that they finally get to kind of go at it. And they want to do, like I said, we kind of talked about both, right? You've got your development stage where they are working on stuff, but a lot of times, there's that part too where they're like, well, I need the rolls, I need the action, and this guy, he's going to give me some looks, right? And so a lot of times, then unfortunately, they are abandoning the new stuff. Like they'll go for it, of course. I've seen them, like I've got a couple guys working on Darce chokes right now, and I see them go for it. But if they're kind of getting shut down, then they're rolling, right? They're finishing with other stuff, and that's fine too. But how do you suggest, as a competitor yourself, that you mix those two in, right? Do you have two different training sessions? Like on your daily practice session, is that okay, look, I'm working on this stuff, I'm doing that, and then these days, Saturday and Sunday, I'm rolling? Or how, what's your game plan according to that?
Yeah, so I normally have 10 sessions of jiu-jitsu a week and 4 lifting sessions. Of those jiu-jitsu sessions, the most well-attended one by the most athletic and game opponents are the Tuesday night, the Wednesday night, and the Friday night session. So those are normally my sessions where I'm like, okay, I'm going to deliberately practice, but if it breaks down, I'm going to react in a more competition oriented fashion. Like I will just beat up a lot more people on those nights. But on the other days, like on a Monday night, I'm really not beating anybody up. I'm just going for whatever I'm working on. And also, if the thing I'm working on is brutal, then I guess I am beating people up, but that's the only thing I'm going for. So you definitely do. I don't think you can enter like this like Buddhist feng shui mood all the time with your training, but a majority should be there. But you do have to keep your teeth sharp. You know, like you can't get soft. Like Tuesday, Wednesday night, I'm going hard with people who I can go hard with.
So then speaking of that too, then I guess you could examine the room and say, all right, these guys I'm going hard with, these guys I'm working the move on. Is that kind of a same thing like you're thinking, or do you, is that how you kind of?
Yeah, I have a weird, I think it's from dropping into a lot of gyms. I have a weird like ability to have like feel the pulse of a room. Like I don't know, I can just kind of tell who's eyeing me as like somebody who looks relatively in shape and is a colored belt. And I'm like, okay, I gotta get rolls with that guy. He looks like a savage. Um, and then, you know, for example, Monday and Thursday nights are gi nights, and those tend to be more casual practitioners. It would be very rude for me to roll with some of them the way like I roll with my friend Colin, my coach, or some of the other competitors. So you do get a feel over time. But if all else fails, right, like I can also feel like when competitors are beat up, like when they're like, you know, overreached a little bit. So I'll give them a more slower technical roll.
I
think
this
that's
kind of
important
leads me.
too. Go ahead, Gary. You're good.
Oh, no, it just leads me to a question, because this is something that I run into often, especially when I was a competitor, is that every once in a while, the hobbyist who was doing good against the other hobbyist would start to go harder with me. And then in self-preservation, I'd have to go a little bit harder because they were coming at me a little harder. And so how do you facilitate that roll into something safe for both of you? Because it's always been something that's hard for me. The guy who is, maybe he's dipped his toes into competition, or he's just seeing that he's a little bit better than the average guy, or maybe even quite a bit better than the average guy. And then he sees me, who goes and competes a lot. And now he wants to kind of challenge me, you know, and it's sort of that, like the lion's trying to take over the other lion's spot, you know. How do you reconcile that?
Yeah. So there's a kind of a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is have like amazing guard retention and make fun of them so they throw themselves into your guard and make themselves tired. That's a hack. The long answer is to, especially if you're not super athletic, I'm not very athletic, pick moves from most positions that are low amplitude and like non-exhausting to execute, and become best at those moves, right? Like if I have a really spazzy guy standing, like I know I can probably still hit a slide by, and it's not going to get, nobody's going to get hurt or anything. I've like a very good shoulder crunch Sumigashi, and nobody's going to get hurt that being hit either. Body lock pass, very low amplitude. The more and more we're moving side to side and going super fast, the more likely it is somebody's going to get themselves hurt. So like an example in opposition would be like, if all I had was like high amplitude, like belly to back suplexes and blast doubles from standing, that would not be what I would want to go for on like, you know, a white belt who's maybe quite athletic and quite game. I'm just going to slow things down and make him play my pace. And once in a while, interestingly, I've been passed more by like super wicked fast athletic white belts than I have like really skilled purple belts. Like they just fly and throw your knees out of the way, and you're like, whoa, okay, what the heck? And you got to regard. But just making them play your tempo, I think, is really important. And your tempo and your game being inherently low amplitude is, I think, a good plan.
Which makes, I mean, you're giving a lot of good information. This really, to me, is probably one of our like most important episodes. Doesn't mean that's the way people are going to treat it, but but I feel like it is, because everybody's always looking for the cheat code for jiu-jitsu, right? And you know, a lot of times we make a joke about it. Like people come to the gym and say, "Man, like so and so is getting really good. Like, what are they doing?" I'm like, "Well, they're here 5 days a week, and you're here 2 days a week, and blah blah blah, right?" Or whatever. But there's really no secret sauce, kind of, but there kind of is. Like, for example, the note taking is a big one, right? And we're kind of like, it's like we've talked about it, but I don't know how many times we've talked about it, right? Like, so like, I hate to, I want this episode to be like a thing that somebody should, like my guys, especially at the gym, like listen to, and I hope they listen to. Like while you're talking, I was looking at my phone if you saw me looking down, but the reason why is because, do you guys know who Malachi Friedman is? He trains. He's got some good videos out there, and I've watched his stuff on Instagram because it's short and digestible, and I think he trains at Extreme Couture now. But anyway, he posted a video today or yesterday, and 3 tips to getting good at jiu-jitsu. So while you're talking, I wanted to look back because I was like, I'm pretty sure he's mentioning the same things that we said here. And then of course he was like, number 1 was take notes. Jiu-jitsu is too far complex to just show up every day and not take notes, right? And I really think it's important, like taking notes the proper way, like that you're mentioning, is also important, right? Because, and that's the thing, there's no right or wrong way. Like we all take notes differently, right? My problem is when I take notes, a lot of times I'll even take notes on when I'm teaching, but a lot of times if it's 2 or 3 days after I've taken the notes, I can't read what I'm saying because I write in this like abbreviated thing that I think I understand. And then literally like the same stuff I went over, I read, I'm like, I have no idea what I just wrote there, right? So I'm also learning that, listen, man, do not take these abbreviated shortcuts because, you know, Butch 10 days from now is retarded and he's not going to remember any of this stuff. So you're going to have to write it a little bit better. But honestly, that is like, I think even while you're speaking, I need to go back. I did all this stuff. And here's the bad thing, you know, I did all this stuff to reach every belt, right? To get to black belt. Then I got to black belt and that was like the goal. And then I had no more goals. Like that was, you know, I mean, now it's like the goal is to run and make other people better, right? But like for my own personal development, I kind of took a bad path, I think, right? And that's what even yesterday or this weekend, I was telling some people, I would argue that I'm 10 times more knowledgeable than I was 2 years ago, but I'd also argue that I was a 10 times better grappler 2 years ago. Like I was in a different mode. And part of that is I don't know where to fit those pieces back into the puzzle. Like I have a game that I follow that I've been doing for 10, you know, plus years. And I kind of always fall back into that, right? Like, but I'm doing better now, meaning that I'm using a lot of single X and a lot of full X and a lot of just stuff, like fitting pieces back into where they need to be. But what I'm not doing really good, I don't think, and I'm probably being a little overcritical of myself, is just mixing those into my game where it's seamless. And that's where my game was before. Like I might have had some pretty big holes, but I was pretty good at avoiding those holes and not making them really evident, unless it was somebody that was really good. Like, of course, when my coach would come or somebody that's really good, they would exploit those holes and then make you look stupid, right? And then you're like, oh man, that sucks, right? But there's only a few people that could do that, which again put me back on this path where I need to fix these things and do these things a little bit different. But the point is, I think I take pretty good notes, but what I'm not doing is taking notes after jiu-jitsu, which is the most important, because that's where you're going to remember. It's just like going to class in college and taking notes and then reviewing your notes. If I'm not doing that, then I'm actually like, I take really good notes on instructionals and things that I'm getting ready to learn, but I'm failing at that part, right? And I say that because I want to help everybody else. That's the part that we really need to do. I need to go in and say, all right, I rolled with Lee. I tried this. It didn't work. Here's why I think it didn't work. And then I can come back the next day and try that a little bit more, not just once, right? And say, okay, blah, blah, blah. And then even I have a bunch of military friends, and one of the things that to do, and I think Jocko's talked about too, is that you should really you debrief after everything. Like in the military, they debrief and they talk about what went good, what went wrong, and how we can become better. That is literally jujitsu, like what we're saying right now. You can say, okay, I tried this. Here's what went right. Here's what went wrong. Here's what I can do to improve. Right. And they do that literally after every training session. For example, my military friends, like for the WVGO, when I ran tournaments, he's like, do you do that after tournaments? I'm like, well, in my head, he said, well, no, you should really sit down and then make sure, because by the time if you don't implement the changes you want, you're probably going to forget, which is 100% true, right? Like 50-50, I'll remember 50. Like I also am old now, so I can't remember stuff. But the reason I'm giving this long-winded answer is just because I really think that's what it takes. Like if I could get the guys at the gym, including myself, and maybe that's the other thing, you should start from the top down. People pay attention to what I do, right? So if I'm like, hey, you guys need to take notes, then I'm over there just not taking notes, right? Like one person could be like, well, you don't need to take notes because he knows everything. We all know that's not true, right? So but it would set a good example, and that's probably what I'm taking away from all this is there's a ton of good information, but I'm like, man, if I really want to make, my guys do this, then I need to lead by a good example too. And I also need to continue, jiu-jitsu is a never ending journey to get better, right? And it's a perishable skill. The less you train, the less you're going to remember and retain. So anyway, I think, man, that's super important, right? I mean, I don't know what you guys think. I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I am saying this on purpose because I want this to be an episode that I know that all my white belts, blue belts, purples that listen to, because, obviously a lot of people at my gym listen to this and they report back, man, that was a good episode. This was good. I want them to listen to this one especially. And I want your guys, Lee, and your guys, Gary, to listen to this and be like, all right, man, like after this was over, here's what I did. And then we single-handedly made everybody in North Carolina, West Virginia, and everywhere else better. Probably not going to happen, but it's high aspirations, right? Like I really want that. That's what I want. My goal now, again, like I took a back seat from my training a little bit, but because I care so much about everybody else, and I care about how can we make our community better. Then that's again, Gary and I talked about this, kind of part of this podcast is taking what we know and talking to people like you to make each other better, right? And to talk. And then sometimes you'll take an idea from here, sometimes you'll take it from there. But man, if we all collaborate, this is what this is about, man. And then maybe we hit a couple people that get a purple belt like you in 2.5 years, it's freaking amazing. And again, it's I've rolled with you. It's important. People need to listen to what you're doing,
Well, kind of jump in here, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm actually curious about this because I think, and Butch, you were there in the kind of the early days of jiu-jitsu being in the United States and starting to grow in the United States as far as the birth of the UFC and seeing that stuff. And the thing that I see the biggest difference in the way it used to be and what is now is the analytical approach that Americans take, and then also the wrestling style training. And I think those are the two things that I see that are a difference and I could be completely wrong, but when I've talked to most of the Brazilians that I've talked with or trained with most of the Brazilians that I've trained with, it's always been, we show up, we do this, we show up, and these are the techniques we do, these are the motions we do, but not really necessarily sitting down and figuring out why this is the position or why this position works. And I'm sure that there are some out there, but it seemed to me that was kind of it was just, this is how we flow. And in the United States, when you look at the approach of the guys at Daisy Fresh, or you see the guys, just guys in America, there's Keaton Cornelius, those guys, it is very analytical, where it's there's a system, but this is why the system works. Here's the ones and zeros that make it work. And we're building a computer program, and then we're doing the training like wrestlers. Is that what you're finding, Lee? Or I mean, why do you think the difference is?
That's actually a great way of putting it. Is if you remember, I don't remember because I wasn't training during this time, but Ryan Hall's instructionals were the first instructionals that were like, all right, base is lets me impart force or accept force from people, right? Like I may be misquoting him. I think I heard Rob Bernacki say Ryan Hall said that, so I don't know if that's true. Um,
You're paraphrasing a paraphrase, but
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So that is like I think a lot of things happened in that training circle. You know, Ryan, JT Torres, Keenan Cornelius were all training there at that time. A lot of great ideas coming out of there. They were smashing tournaments. And then you know, Henzo, you know, has John start teaching, and John's kind of doing the same thing. And now, and also it's very important not to underestimate Eddie Bravo in that you know, movement, because Eddie's, it's funny, John's like white belt DVDs are called Enter the System. That's also the name of Eddie's original instructional series, Enter the System. So all these guys were just seeking, you know, analytical, systemized improvement. And then, you know, probably, I mean, I think it really started with Nicky Rod placing at ADCC 2019. You realize we've done a good job of systemizing the grounded portion, but we have a lot of weaknesses in our grappling. And, you know, Firas Zahabi says, like, wrestling is grappling, jiu-jitsu is grappling. We should be good grapplers, right? And that's become a lot more relevant to me in the last year, is that, like, if you can't wrestle, if you can't take down like nerdy guard players who don't want to pull guard because they're afraid of like getting a disadvantage or whatever, like, dude, you have a weakness in your game. If you can't take down people off the street, there's a weakness in your game. So every day in my sessions that I teach, we start off with 15 to 20 minutes of basic wrestling instruction at about 30 to 50% intensity. Nothing crazy at all. Normally we go hand fighting till we break a sweat, because I think it's kind of bad if you're not warm to be shooting on your knees. It just doesn't feel good. I don't have any science to back that. And then, you know, a little takedown defense, a little takedown offense, and people, their quality of movement, it from everywhere is increasing at an insane rate, opposed to when I was just teaching in a fashion that was just static drilling, seated versus standing. So like a lot of people in the last 2 months of me doing this are just moving more quality from their guard, in their guard passing. And that, I think, is the real strength of wrestling, is it teaches you how to move. You know, like, good luck sweeping a D1 wrestler your size, you know? And so we do that, and then we go into a grounded portion, which is just me analyzing these trends that you just described, that like, okay, we need a system to learn this. Seems like we can learn a lot quicker if we have a system, and wrestling seems to be pretty darn important. So yeah, that's, and I think also like the work at Penn State is crazy. The like, if you ever hear them talk about their training sessions, they're basically just flow wrestling full time, and that's the best team in the country year after year. If any hardcore wrestling fans get at me, I'm sorry, but I like how they train. And Danaher's doing the same thing. I was a big fan of like the original squad, like Eddie Cummings, Gary Tonin, Gordon, when those were the main guys. And if you see them train, like Polaris just put out a video of them training like 5 years ago, and they're just tinkering with little techniques. The white belts in the class are just doing the butterfly sweep, but Gary and Eddie are messing with it a little bit and seeing what could come out of it, how to enter the legs off it, for example. And so I think this very American thing, I'll go ahead and claim it, I love America. So this very American thing of like the linearity of jiu-jitsu, which maybe is unfair because Damian Maya had the science of jiu-jitsu, or the science of grappling, that DVD. But he was trained in America at the time. So yeah, that is interesting. There's two trends rising, and Americans seem to be at the cutting edge of them for sure.
Well, and I think it's also, and I'm not, obviously, this is not me trying to be patriotic or overly patriotic about it. I think it's just,
I am trying to be
and
patriotic.
I'm 100% okay with that. So absolutely, I think it's the best place to live. It's the reason I still live here. I don't really have any intentions in traveling outside the country unless my wife makes me. So this is where I want to be. But I just think it is a different, there is a different style, a different, not that they're not working hard, but a different kind of work ethic, a different kind of approach when it comes to training to get better at something, and I'm not so certain that anywhere else, like, so it can be bad, but sometimes a lot we get very tunnel vision in the United States, and that's the reason individual things can become so amazing. But the rest of the life, there's cons to this too. The rest of the life can be in scrambles. I will narrowly focus on one thing, and then everything else around me is burning down. But it's okay, because the one thing that I'm focused on, I'm diligently focused on. But going back to the training, like, as far as I think there is something inherent in the way the wrestling has been combined with jiu-jitsu in the United States that changed it a little bit from what was originally there in Brazil when it originally came to the United States. And I think you can see evidence in this in Hiles Gracie, when he was traveling all over the place. He was doing judo, he was doing sambo, he was doing wrestling, and then he goes back and he trains with, his brothers, his cousins. And they're like, this guy is unstoppable. There's nothing we can do. He was beating up on Hickson. He was beating up on Helson, like all of those guys back in Brazil. And he was adding stuff to his jiu-jitsu outside of Elio, and I think that is more evidence, is that I think in the United States, we're a lot more the melting pot. Maybe that's part of it too, is like taking everything and boiling it into this grappling.
Yeah, it's a lot to digest. I'm just watching y'all look, right? Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I think the more that you're reaching outside of your realm and trying to learn and do personal development, right? The better that you're coming, the better that you're going to be all together, and then the better that you're making your training partners, right? I think that's the point, right? I mean, what do you think, Lee? Like, what else do you think that in this conversation that we're missing? I know that, and part of the way that we're talking about leading up to this, we're talking about setting up the training room correctly too. What are your, obviously besides taking notes, what do you think when we set up the training room, how are we going to maximize that for personal development and growth for the people that you're teaching, not just yourself, but for your quote unquote students? And I say that because I hate that word, but what do you think? I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, on that question?
Yeah. So first of all, I will add an addendum to my statements on like American versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think a lot of the perceived difference could also have a lot to do with just language barrier. Like Paulo Miao and Jao Miao and Marcelo Garcia clearly have very defined systematic jiu-jitsu approaches at a high level. You know what I mean? I think the two Brazilians win ADCC of the weight category. Anyways, Brazilians are still, doing well. But
it is important to say that I don't think that there are obviously clearly many well-versed Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners right now. We are not at a lack of them. It's just what is different that is making all of these Americans accelerate so fast. You being one of them too, but like Gordon Ryan flew through, like he flew up. Gary Tonin, Eddie, like all those guys, they exploded. Was Eddie a brown belt when he won ADC? He had just gotten his brown belt when he beat Hoyler, right?
Eddie Bravo.
Yeah, oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Eddie Bravo.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Eddie Bravo was a brown belt when he beat Hoyler.
yeah,
Yeah, because he
and
got his
then
black belt after that, right?
yeah, and then you know, BJ Penn, obviously, like really fast to black belt, won nationals. Um, but like there's something different, and that's all I'm saying. Like, not that there
Put it
aren't
like that.
Brazilians who are doing the
Yeah.
same thing, they were, but it just seems that there's something
Well,
different to accelerate that growth.
Before you go, Lee, let me just quote Mo Jassim from the ADCC, right? That's right. So his viewpoint, again, this is not me. So then take it for what it will, but his viewpoint is the Brazilians are behind now because they don't have wrestling and they don't have leg locks, right? He's quoted this several times. And he said until they catch up, like he thinks that they're at a deficit right now, right? Where they led this again, and like whether you agree with that or not, I do see some validity in that, right? That it's hard to think, like when you're on top, and there's no reason to change. And maybe they were guilty of that, right? They were always on top, and now they're maybe a step behind. I see the point. I listened to the interviews from Gordon and Mo Jassim, and I do see their point, right? They're just saying when he goes to the trials in Brazil, he's not seeing what he's seeing here. And those were the two things, wrestling and leg locks. And they need to catch up. And they could catch up within a year, right? Like, just as you said, your wrestling got better in 6 months. GSP got some pretty darn good wrestling. And, like we're not talking they're leap years behind, right? There's just a couple holes they got to fix compared to the new game, right? I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I'll put this to bed. Sorry if I'm carrying this on too long, but I do think like a lot of that is because of the widespread use of instructionals, like socioeconomic factors that disallow a lot of native Brazilians. Like, I'm a middle-class white kid from West Virginia. Like, oh, if I put in a couple hours of work and watch my money a little bit, I can go buy a John Danaher instructional. I have that luxury. But back to just to put that to bed. But back to the actual structure of the training room, I think two concepts from education really helped me, like backwards design, starting with what do my students need from me? What adaptations do I want to see in their games? And not starting with like, oh, I saw this guy get his guard passed. Maybe that happens, and maybe that leads to the data set, but it should be more like everybody in the gym is bad at this thing. We're not good enough at this thing yet. Like, for example, we're working a lot right now on just the engagement phase, like getting to a guard, getting to single X, getting to De La Hiva. That's a very competitively important phase that not a lot of people work on, like hand fighting from guard. So starting with, the end in mind. And then secondarily, I learned this from like vocabulary instruction, establishing rich and effective routines, like something that they somewhat look forward to, right? And that's a lot of people just tell me, they're like, oh, I really enjoy this wrestling we do every day to start training. And I didn't do it because I thought they would enjoy it. I did it because I was like, okay, our wrestling's bad. How do we work on it? And the answer I came to was it's less about having a hyper detailed long form instruction and more like, okay, guys, here's a running the pipe finish. Let's go hit 100 running the pipe finishes. It's more like that. It's more like a sports practice, really, is what it ends up looking like. And so to not, cloud their minds with like all these dichotomies that we draw in grounded jiu-jitsu, which I think are important and we need to understand them. Just be like, okay, guys, none of you know how to do a double leg. Here's a double leg. Let's do it. Is very, it sounds so simple, but you wouldn't, I think a lot of jiu-jitsu classes, you warm up, you do static drilling, and then you roll, which is okay. But I think there's a lot in between that static drilling and the rolling that all information sometimes is lost. And so operating in positional work at 30 to like 70% intensity between there, I think has really helped people transfer skills. And littler things like specific games I do, I think really help people's quality of movement. Because a lot of hobbyists, like if they didn't play sports as a kid, like they say, like if you didn't play sports between 6 and 13, like you're just like way behind the ball. That's true, and it's still my job to teach them. I shouldn't be like, all right, pack her up. You didn't play soccer, get out of here. And the drills I incorporate. So I have one. I stole it from a Rob Biernacki instructional. It's his sweeping drill. The bottom guy comes in and gets to pick whatever guard he wants, and he's just trying to sweep the top guy. The top guy, all he's doing is riding out off balances, and if he gets his butt put on the ground, he's springing back up, not trying to get full sweep points, right? So they go double seated, and the other guy stands. That simple drill added for 3 months, oh my gosh, people were moving so much differently. So I think it's really important for us to realize that, like, yes, we're teaching a martial art, it is artistry, but also like a lot of people we're teaching need to just have better movement. It's a sport also is what I'm saying, I suppose.
So yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I like the thought process there. Like, here's what I'm noticing too, Gary, and you may think the same, but I think when I hear you talk, I hear a lot of things that remind me, and this will be good for you, but it reminds me of John Danaher, meaning that you both come from an educational background. So you're really breaking things down at almost a philosophical thing. And obviously he comes from a philosophical background. So that's why I use that word, but more so than a jiu-jitsu, like as a just jiu-jitsu practitioner, and that it learned to teach through just teaching, meaning not through an educational thing. Like I'm like, here's jiu-jitsu, here's the moves we're going to learn, and then here's how we're going to implement those moves, right? But I like hearing the theory behind it, and that's why I think a lot of people enjoy when that John Danaher speaks, right? Because there's importance behind why you're doing what you're doing, and I think we gravitate to that, and you have that whatever that is, right? Like when I hear that and I hear you speak, I believe you. You could be talking nonsense, right? But I believe it. Like, you know,
well,
I'm like,
and we've kind of talked about this before, is like coaching styles, and honestly, like the coaching style that I most like to have for myself is kind of the Half Gracie, I'm going to come up and slap you until you do it right. Like that's what I enjoy out of a coach. Hey, you idiot, you messed it up. Why are you messing it up? Because that makes that I want to make people happy. And so for whatever reason, that motivates me the best in learning something. However, when I teach, it is all about, am I using all of the right words to convey exactly what I mean? Because if I put a word in that doesn't make sense, or if I put a word in that's wrong and I say move your left hand when you're supposed to move your right hand, then that bugs me. And so like when I'm teaching, I try to make sure that everything I say is necessary for this move, and kind of like what you said, that there's no fat on it, right? I've cut all the fat out. This is what you need to do, and this is why you need to do it. So I try and give a reasoning for it. So if I'm teaching sweeps, one of the things I talk about is that if the hips are above the head, someone's sweepable. Keep that in mind all the time. If you see their hips rise above their head, that means that they're now in a position where they can be swept. Keep the eye out. And so if you're going to something like an overhead sweep or a balloon sweep or whatever you will call it, if you're going to something like that, it's because the hips have raised above their head. They either by you sliding deeper underneath to take them over, or them walking their legs towards you, but something happened to elevate them, right? And so it's on top of that, I'm making sure that I'm conveying all the information as far as the technique, but also this is why.
Yeah, I think it's, oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, go ahead, Lee. I'll follow up on this. Go ahead and finish your thought, and then I'll finish what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think it's very important, like to have fairly complex and well thought out motivations for why you're doing things in the training room, but when they get to the student, they're minimalistic and simple, right? Which is like highlights why like coaching is actual work you're doing in coaching is often thankless, which is most coaches are fine with that. I'm fine with that. But I have like, reasons in my head for why I'm doing everything. And if I have to like sit them down for 3 hours and explain to them all the reasons, there's going to be no transfer there. It has to be all like they have to get a very refined product. And I put a lot of work into that, honestly.
So this is a question I want to ask both of you, but Lee in particular, because we were talking, kind of what started this whole thing was setting up the training room correctly, right? So let's talk about really from like a base up. Okay, so let's kind of like, let's say that I'm a new guy. I just walked in the gym. I'm a white belt. I've never trained before. And for that matter, let's say that maybe I never played sports before, right? Like going back to your other point. What positions and submissions do you think are the most important thing for a guy to build, a guy or a girl, right? To build their foundation and start from white belt up. Like, for example, I've heard some of Danaher's, and I'm gonna, because I haven't taken notes, I'm not gonna remember, but it was like, I think he had a good emphasis on guard retention, because he's like, look, everybody's gonna pass your guard. So if you can get used to that, that's great. And then maybe number 2 was actually starting to pass guard. I don't remember. And then somewhere, in his submissions, for example, we all heard the famous stories with Gary Tonin, like you need to develop a guillotine, you don't have one, and he worked on it forever, like stuff like that. So what is your thought process? And Gary, the same for you. I want to ask you both, and then we'll kind of maybe come up with something, a collaboration or a common theme here.
That's interesting, I guess. I always struggle with this question, because I think what John says is like pin escapes to guard retention to sweeping, and then you work out your top game. But I think actually a lot of people who are not athletic enough for the room, or don't have like a lot of physical gifts, if they just are putting themselves in a pin, they kind of wire themselves wrong, and it takes a while to unfix. Like they get into, like, how many times have you mounted a white belt and they've just stood here with like closed elbows like forever, like their arms are shaking and stuff. I think you program a bit too much of that if you teach pin escapes first, to be honest, at least in my experience. Obviously, John Dana, much better coach than me, so probably listen to him. But I would say, like, getting good at a guard that deals with diverting pressure. So like butterfly's the most obvious one, right? So they're coming into you, you go, and you throw them over your head. Also like Z guard, I would say, does this. And butterfly half. I don't actually think closed guard really does this. Like, how many times also have you seen like closed guard, 2 white belts in closed guard, they're just like grabbing onto each other like this. Like it takes, I think, a lot of the time out of the training. So what I tell people, and from top, I think it's actually a lot simpler, because all the best passers in the world are just working to get chest to chest and then finishing from there, whether that be with a body lock or with top half guard. The rest of it, like the side to side Toriando work, which is what stuff I'm working on, I love that stuff, is just ways to open up that chest to chest work, in my opinion. So I think, in my opinion, you would take a white belt and be like, all right, we're going to learn how to butterfly sweep people, because it'll help like when people are just blitzing you all the time, which is what it always feels like when you're a white belt. And once you're on top, if you get on top, hopefully you do, let's work to passing half guards, stripping basic knee shields, passing a half butterfly. And then from there, I think you can kind of submission wise, just kind of pick, and they'll tend to gravitate, make them aware of the submissions, like the good ones, like Kimura, arm bar, arm triangle, mounted triangle. And they, in my opinion, start self-selecting for what fits their body type and disposition. Like, I literally only, as a white belt, had mounted triangles and like I have long, flexible legs, so that makes sense. So yeah, I would say get good at butterfly sweeps, get good at holding people down, keeping them on their butts once you put them there, passing half guard, and then submissions, I think, is honestly a lot less important.
Yeah, so you
Yeah,
don't have systematic like guillotine first, triangle, blah blah blah. I agree with that too, right? Like, but I was thinking earlier before you go, Gary. Sorry to cut you off, but I think a lot of times when we talk John Danaher, right? We all do because they've revolutionized it. It's funny because a lot of stuff he says is very common sense, right? But that is jujitsu. Like it literally is, right? Like put your hand here, like, oh, like I just missed that step, right? So I'm not undermining what he says. But the point is, like, I forgot what I was saying, but the point is like that we all have a little different. And then actually what really was the point is when he makes statements in general, he's talking about professional athletes. We forget about this, right? Like he's got a different crop of people, right? Not saying he doesn't train new people because he has, he was the basement instructor for Henzo forever. So he has, but like when he's talking about Gary Tonin getting a good guillotine, it's because Gary Tonin had the other tools, right? Or he's talking about the other guy that just won to ADC, the guy with the G name, right? Like he didn't have good leg locks. So he had, I mean, like it's very specific to their skill set, and they're already like a black belt. They're already like a brown belt. They're already this, they're already that. So like it is a little different than we're talking for a hobbyist, a brand new person, as opposed to what John Danaher is saying. And I mention that because if somebody's listening to this, I want that to make sure it's a little different, right?
Yeah, well, and that's exactly what I was going to, no. It actually fits kind of perfectly into what I was going to say, because now, I would say at least 60% of the people who do jiu-jitsu probably either A, won't compete ever, or B, will only compete a couple times. I'd say that's probably a good, at least as far as adults, right? So when I'm teaching jiu-jitsu to hobbyists, the thing that I keep in mind is that this is probably something that they're using for street self-defense. And so I do go very old school Gracie with those guys. It's all about guard retention. Once we get to guard, if we can sweep, they should be comfortable with a couple sweeps, right? But it's all about maintaining connection with your opponent so that they can't punch or headbutt you, and then trying to maneuver yourself to either the top or the back. And so that is where I try and concentrate everything. If we can get good takedowns, we can get good takedowns, but you should at least be able to pull guard, right? Because I don't expect anybody who weighs 150 pounds to shoot a double leg on somebody who weighs 220. It's just silly. Even trained wrestlers know that trying to shoot underneath somebody who's bigger, the natural reaction is to kind of sprawl. And so it's not good to be stuck under somebody. So even those guys will use arm drags, duck unders, and stuff like that. So for the hobbyist, I am teaching a lot of guard retention and a lot of moving towards the back. If it's a competitor, I think the focus should be kind of like what you were saying, Lee, is figure out your game. You're gonna, and this is part of the note-taking process. If I come in and I took X, Y, and Z's back, and I take the back pretty regularly against these folks, I'm gonna start trying to take, A, B, and C's back at the next practice, right? Because those people are tougher to take the back on. And you can kind of find out like where your game is as far as like, are you a good arm drag? Do you have a good K guard? Are you a good half guard? Do you like to wrestle up? Are you a pressure passer? Find your game. And then for the competitors, especially leading up to a competition, you should be funneling everything there, right? Whatever you're good at for a reason, whether it be your body's mechanics are just built for that. Like you said, you're long guys are usually good at triangles. This should be a big part of the game. Long guy, long, thinner arms are great for Darce's anacondas. Like that game is more readily available to you than somebody who's shorter with thicker legs, right? Not that they can't do it, but it's just usually not their game. So find out what your game is, funnel everything to that. You know, I prefer to be, if I'm on bottom, I want to be a half guard player. I like to wrestle up to dogfight. Once I get to dogfight, then I can use whatever sweep that is available. My opponent will tell me what I can do and what I can't. And then I will take that. And once I'm on top, I want to pressure pass, lots of pressure. And I'm looking to gather head and arm. That way, when I get to mount, I've already solidified a head and arm. That's what I want to do. And it's not a secret. Everybody at my gym knows that. It's just me funneling them towards those moves. So, and that's what I suggest for the competitors is figure out what your game is, what you're good at, and start funneling that. When you're not in competition mode and you're kind of in learning mode and you don't have anything coming up, now what is around what you're good at and how do you add on to that? That way you can be multifaceted. If my half guard game doesn't go as planned and I'm not able to wrestle up, how can I turn this into a leg lock game? Or how can I turn this into another guard? And that's where I like in the, hey, it's learning time. That's what I do with my competitors is, okay, you got here and you're really good at this, but it's not always going to work against everybody. What's your redundancy? And so let's build around that now to make you more dynamic. Thoughts, Lee?
No.
Yeah, I think for sure with hobbyists, I think the answer that like get good at pin escapes first really underestimates the genuine fear reaction I see in a lot of people who have never engaged in sports in their life, who've not really been in fights or anything. Like, I don't need people to come to me wanting, quality martial arts instructions and to like see huge spikes in cortisol and be scared. So I guess that's my point with which agrees with your point, right? I don't know why I said it like we were disagreeing. Like guard attention and butterfly initially to like just subvert a little bit of that, like feeling like a hailstorm's coming at you, and maybe once we learn how to calm down in the training room, then we can work on pin escapes. But if you can't be like calm in a pin, dude, like I mean, I don't know, some people might have like a heart attack in training. Like you don't want to see that. Like, and that's, I guess, even when I first started, I watched a YouTube video. John Danner was like, you get good at pin escapes, kid. I was like, okay. So I saved up, bought his DVD. I was in decent shape. I like played sports enough to be okay with physical contact, and it worked out great. But a lot of people that I get coming in, I think, are just genuinely scared, and I don't want them to feel that way. So I think front loading the guard work lets them digest everything else better later, personally.
Yeah, and I remember too, like speaking of that, is when you guys both kind of brushed on this a little bit, which is the opposite of what I do. But I think Danaher had also said he thinks half guard is a more dynamic position for new people to learn. It's the opposite of what you think, right? Because I think traditional jiu-jitsu always start with closed guard, and maybe that's because of the self-defense aspect, right? Meaning that you hold the arm in the head and blah blah blah. But he was, I think in one of the interviews I saw was kind of echoes what you both had said, is that he likes to start in half guard, and the reason is more dynamic positioning, and it teaches you to like not be flat on your back, right? Which is unfortunately the part of closed guard where you're flat on your back. And then again, to kind of go back to what you were saying, Lee, way earlier, is that what I've also noticed, and we try to do this, like, it's funny because I don't harp on people unless they're getting ready for a competition or something, is the hand fighting in closed guard is non-existent for most people. And that really should be. Like, this is what I see a lot, is that, let's say I'm in closed guard, almost everybody lets you get whatever grip you want to get, right? You go straight to the chest and then straight to the hip or whatever. And I'm like, no, like that means I'm fighting one or two steps behind. The fight starts with not letting you get that grip, or if you get the grip, to immediately breaking your grip so that you're not comfortable, right? And that's how kind of like, in that way I get into sweeps and submissions, because you're uncomfortable even on top and you can't really get a positioning and you're kind of off balance and blah, 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 right? But I do think it's an interesting way to look, because then obviously, we could look at Hodger, who would disagree with all that and say, no, you should do close guard, and he dominates everybody, right? And that's what the beauty of these conversation is, is that there is some different philosophies and different looks at all this stuff. And quite frankly, like, they're not too far off balance, right? Like, if somebody says you should learn half guard because it's more dynamic and you're not on your back, there's nothing wrong with that, right? As opposed to somebody like Hodger that says, no, you should learn this because this is how jiu-jitsu started and I destroy everybody with close guard, right? Like, they're both like, there's not, you're not going to go that wrong, right? And I think we're all pretty in line with each other, right? I think, and I think that's important. But what I'm noticing is just like, none of us are that vastly different, I guess, is what I'm noticing, right? I think we're all on the same page, and I think is conveying this knowledge to the white belt on what you should do, right? And that is, to kind of summarize, I guess, right, is look, let's take some notes, look what you need to be good on. And again, pin escapes is great. Like, again, I think I said it in the wrong order, but the point is kind of what you said, Lee, is that from Danaher, is that, look, you're going to be put inside body, you're going to be put in mount. You get comfortable in this positions, not freaking out, right? Because the white belt or the new guy is the guy that throws his arm up and gives you an arm bar, right? So don't freak out there. Learn to be comfortable, protect yourself, and then guard retention, and then stuff like that. And just working on that stuff little by little. And I like going back to what you said earlier, that 6 to 10 week conversation. I think as an instructor, and I was a little guilty of this, and I think I was guilty of the American way, meaning that I feel like people are paying me and they want to learn something new constantly, right? And I felt guilty into like moving too fast. So for example, recently we've been doing Ashigrami or single X, right? And I've made it through pretty much our material in roughly, let's say, a month. I made it through all the positions I want to go to. But what I used to do was just move on to the next thing. Like we made it through the material and then we practiced it a little bit. And now let's go on to the next thing, right? And what I've taken a break this time was like, look, we went through the material. So now in the warm-ups, we're kind of we're doing a refresher. But now it's just positional sparring, at least for another month. I'm not going to move on, right? And the reason there's part of the reason I moved on too is what I just said. But the other reason was, like, I can look at people and I can tell, like, not everybody really gives a shit about single X or Ashi, right? Like, I picked that because in general, I think everybody needs to know. But like the 2 or 3 that are unhappy, like, I catered to them too much, right? And so now I'm like, look, man, like, I get it. We'll just, you're just gonna have to deal with it. Like, we're gonna work on these positions, and other things can happen in between that, but like, we're gonna do this for at least a month before I move on, right? And by a month, I teach on Monday, Wednesday. That's not that long. That's like, 4 weeks. It's like a couple sessions. It's not that big a deal. But I've made that adjustment too, because I think I'm moving too fast, and then nobody's really retaining it, because the same thing happened to me, meaning like, I'm old, right? I started grappling in like the 90s, 97. So for me to put something into my game now, I've really got to hammer it, because if I move on right away, it's going out the window the second that my brain just goes back to what I've been doing for 20 years, right? So like, I kind of took what my brain needs to put on everybody else, right? And so I'm going to make that adjustment. And I think that goes with what both of you are saying. And maybe I wasn't doing the right thing as an instructor, but I'm okay admitting that. Like, that's the point of these conversations, is I need to make adjustments. We all need to make adjustments, but I want those people to understand why I'm making this adjustment, because I don't feel like they're getting enough. Like, we got to drill a little bit more. And if you don't like it, okay, that's cool. Like, just wait till you do like the thing that we get to, right? It's not for everybody, right? And that's okay.
Eat your peas until you like them.
Yes, and that's for me too. I can't cater to everybody. That goes, not to get political, but that goes with the thing where people are like, we're catering too much to the loud voices. That's what I was doing for example, doing a lot of leg locks right now. There's some people that don't want to get hurt. I get it. Like they're like, I don't want to do leg locks. I don't want my knees to be destroyed. So like I was catering too much to those 2 or 3 people instead of the masses. And now I'm like, okay, you're just gonna have to get through it, and you'll be okay. Like it'll be okay. Like it's okay. Like jujitsu is not everything you like, but you got to be ready when the guy does something that you don't like. You got to know what he's doing, right? It doesn't matter if you're ever going to do this, but you got to know, because I'm tired of people. The reason we're on Ashy and single X right now is because I was tired of people standing up to pass guard or being in daily Hiva, and somebody puts them in Ashy or single X and they freak the F out and tap. And there's nothing going on. They're already tapping. Like there's nothing going on. I'm like, we got to make you guys comfortable in this position. And that's the downfall of my instruction up until this point. And that's, so I'm trying to fix that. Right. So I think the reason I'm saying all this is I think this just goes on to what, this whole podcast is about, what Lee is saying and what Gary's saying. And what I'm trying to say is that there's a systematic approach to all this, that I'm trying to make my people at my gym, my members better. And I'm also trying to be better as an instructor. I mean, I think, does that make sense what I'm saying, Lee?
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's also this thing to it is that, like, I think it's important to note, like, hell, you're going to have a hard time finding 2 better people to listen to than John Danaher and Hodger. And their advice is the opposite. John says, do pin escapes. Hodger says, play close guard and mount people. Right.
Yeah.
So the good news is that it does seem semi-arbitrary, but as long as you're putting work in, deliberate long-term work in, and improving day over day, it seems to end up all right, which I think is very encouraging and should take a lot of stress off people. Because I remember as a white belt, I was always like, oh my gosh, what if I'm just working on the totally wrong thing? Don't worry, your results will let you know that you're working on the wrong thing every time.
As long as you have self-realization, right? Then you're down the wrong path, right? That's the other, not everybody has that. Like we take that for granted, but some people will stay on that wrong path for a really, really long time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, and it really does. I think a lot of it, especially for competitors or guys who are just trying to get better at jiu-jitsu, it really does come down to, and you hear it all the time. I say it all the time, but how much time are you putting in? Because it doesn't matter. I've been over it on this podcast. My guys are sick of hearing me say it at jiu-jitsu, but I call it the rule of tens. And the first 10 times you do anything in life, you're terrible at it. And you do it 100 times and it seems like you might know. 10 times 10 is 100. So you kind of know what's going on. Do it 1,000 times, people can look at you and they can say you are doing that thing. Do it 10,000 times and you've probably mastered it by that time. It doesn't matter if you're writing your name, tying your shoe, driving a car, like all of it is just time in. And if you get your time in, and it's got to be time in where you're considerate of what you're trying to achieve. It can't just be showing up and laying on the floor, because that's not going to cut it. You have to be considerate of what you're there to do. And as long as you get your time in, you'll get better. And that's the reason most of us, it takes a decade in order to get us our black belts, because we need about 10,000 hours in order to get there. And even guys who get there faster, usually it means they showed up more. They were probably there, like you said, 10 training sessions a week is a lot. That's a lot for anybody, let alone even competitors. Like most competitors probably aren't training 10 sessions a week. High level guys obviously are, but somebody who's going to school and trying to get a secondary education degree, like that's a lot of time to put into something outside of your regular life. And so you will be rewarded in the time that you put in.
Yeah. Oh, it just left my brain. I think it is like really important to just, like, I know, like, people have told me personally, like one of my very good friends, he's quite a high level black belt. He's 5'5", 150 pounds, right? Like very small person. He was like, yeah, dude, when I was a white belt, I would just triangle people, and I would wonder like why this wasn't like transferring upward, you know what I mean? And he was like, oh, it clearly wasn't the game, and so you have to encounter these walls to know what's wrong. But if you're never seeking out, the people or the competition that are the wall, you're never going to figure it out. Now he's one of the best leg lockers in the world. His name's Rob Diggle. He has good instructionals. If you want to buy them, they're okay.
Yeah.
So I think, what's up?
Nothing.
Oh,
I think you're hearing stuff over there is what you're doing. I'm just fucking with you.
okay. Yeah. But and the part of the thing is it's our job to know the students. I never call them my students. It feels weird.
Ruthless, man. That's my pet peeve, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm glad you said that. If you haven't listened to this podcast, I don't ever call somebody a student. It's not wrong. It's not wrong. It just means that we're friends, man. Like I don't put myself above my friends, period. The end, right? Like, so when somebody says like my student, there's not, like, I'm not harping on this. There's nothing wrong with that, but I choose never to use that word. Like I just don't, like, I can't. I say my gym member, or, you know what I mean? Like my friends, my training partners, right? Like, so I'm with you. I'm glad you said that, because it just means like we really care about the people we train with, honestly. But for the other people that say that word, doesn't mean they don't care either. Like, those people are awesome. Gordon Ryan will say his students, like, clearly he cares, like, you know what I mean? But I'm just saying that because I love that. I love that you said that.
Yeah, and that's even a more powerful reasoning than mine. Mine's more like, I'm fucking 20 years old and they're like successful adults. What do I have to teach them other than jiu-jitsu? Nothing, right? Like, they're reminding me to do my taxes. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a simple, like, I care about them, and it doesn't make me, a god of jiu-jitsu that I can beat them up simply because my schedule and school luckily allows for me to train a lot. Like, I'm not better than any of these people. So I treat them well, I think, and I treat them like friends. Sometimes I talk too much shit to my students just because I consider them my friends, and then I gotta like double back around the room like, oh man, I'm sorry, your jiu-jitsu is not actually that bad. I was just but yeah.
No, that goes with our gym too. That's funny. Like Hunter, but he was rolling with his buddy today, and his buddy's name's Levi Smith. But anyway, they roll and they talk shit the entire time they're rolling. But he was like, you totally give every Smith in this world a bad name because your jiu-jitsu so shitty. Like, that's literally what he said while he's passing his guard, and I was like, but I know, like, they're just joking, right? Like, and we laugh about it because they're and they crack on themselves too. Like, so when you're saying that, that's the thing. Like, nobody gives your training partners a harder time than us because it's part of jiu-jitsu. Like, we're also strangling people, so it's okay if you talk shit. It's just like, again, like, outside of the training thing, while we're talking on a podcast, I don't want to say like my student, which is, again, not wrong. It's just like, there's a time to talk shit and make fun of people, and then there's a time for respect. And I think the time for respect is when nobody else knows who I'm talking about. So then it's like, my friends, they did this, they did that. Like, but when we're in the training room, I'm like, I can't even say half the stuff I say because this podcast would get kicked off YouTube for like half the stuff I say, like, right? That's a different story. But
yeah,
I think that's also great, as a good instructor, is like, we're just giving each, like, again, just what you said, right? Like, just because you're good at jiu-jitsu doesn't mean like, you're putting yourself over somebody because that guy's good at electricity, right? He's an electrician, he's this or that. I don't know nothing about that. And nobody says like, well, I was talking to Butch, my student, about hooking up this outlet, right? I just think it's goofy. Like, it's just good. But it's okay.
And like, my one gift is that I am just totally willing to spend an irrational amount of time on something for basically no monetary reward. Like, that's not a good talent, you know what I mean? Like, they help people out in the world, and I hope sincerely that I do help the people who come to my classes, but I'm just like willing to sit here and watch jiu-jitsu DVDs all night. Like, that's not that impressive to me, I guess. compared to like, I don't know, we have like nurses who come to class, like they're saving people's lives, you know?
Well, I find it impressive. I don't. I'm pretty sure that most people find it impressive. I think it's inspirational when I see somebody get good at something really quick, and it means that they've put in time that other people aren't willing to put into. And so, like, I don't want you to shortchange that so much. Also, don't stop doing it because it is important, right? Especially, you know,
Yeah.
you obviously are huge into competition right now. This is the part of your life that probably you can get the most out of competition, you know, before you know, I was in my 30s before I started competing. So the added advantage of that extra 10 years is great for you. This is the time you should be testing your body a little bit and finding out how far you can travel on this jiu-jitsu journey. So as easy as it is to say that it's not important for somebody to sit down and spend hours looking at videos, or, you know, I'm that guy too. I've time-stamped a whole bunch of instructionals, and I've taken notes on instructionals of where those timestamps are. And then I broke that down with other instructionals. And so I think it's important, you know, people are coming to you for that knowledge, and you're the one going out and seeking it. So it is important. Maybe it doesn't seem as important as, you know, the nurse who's, you know, providing respiratory care to somebody, or to the police officer that is, you know, doing the thing. But it has its place in society. It has its place in keeping those people healthy, you know. And that's a big thing, is like there's a lot of mental health that comes from jiu-jitsu that isn't competition. It's just me escaping from my day. You know, I work for Terminex, and I'm a bug guy. And there's, you know, when I go to jiu-jitsu, I don't have to think about that anymore. You know, even as the instructor, like, it's an escape for me from my regular life. So there is importance around that. And so I appreciate you for that. And I don't want you to shortchange yourself. You know?
Oh, thanks, man. I that's very kind. I appreciate that. I guess I just meant that, like, it's very fun for me to do so. You know what I mean? Like, it's the most fun I have. So it just doesn't register on that scale for me. You know, I guess that's more what I meant.
Well,
And like,
oh, go ahead.
I guess I do think it is for all of our, like, I don't know, posting samurai quotes on Facebook and whatever, it is a leisure activity. In economics, is what we do would be classified as leisure. And I'm very thankful that people, you know, pay the gym and then concurrently pay me to provide them with, this is their choice of leisure activity. And I think that's massively, every civilization has participated in leisure in some way. So yeah, and I think like this, like, hardcore mentality, like I'm raising wolves in here, doesn't actually transfer to how things really are. For a few hours when people come in here, they have less life stress. I think that is valuable.
Let me ask you one question, the follow-up, kind of like in everything we just said. As I saw a post from you, like either today or yesterday, but it was in this week though, and I think you said something about film study. Do you remember that post by chance? Or
Yes, yeah.
So when you say film study, are you actually watching matches, or are you watching instructionals together?
Okay, so the group film study is a new project. That was actually the first time we did it. So when I film study, I just watch instructionals obsessively. Then I have also full athlete studies. Like my Gordon Ryan folder is very comprehensive. I have chronologically every match I can find, and all the training footage I can find of him. But the film study with the group at the gym is a bit different. So I go through, and for example, we covered half guard passing. So I chose 3 athletes that I knew, like, click on any of their matches, they're gonna pass half guard probably. And that was Gordon Ryan, Joseph Chin, who's very talented, and if you don't watch him, you definitely should. He's going to be big. He's 18 years old. He's a freak. And John Satava. Three completely different body types. Satava is very squat and super jacked. Joseph is an 18-year-old. He's sort of tall and very lanky and not very strong. And then Gordon is Gordon, right? And I clipped bits of them all passing half guard. And then I went to John Danaher's half guard passing DVD, which I have, and clipped. Basically, all they were using was finishing chest to chest from head and arm. So like up top, finishing chest to chest from double unders, an S gripping beneath the head, and then finishing chest to chest from over under. Very basic stuff. Stuff that I think you can teach in a class just fine, but putting together 20 clips of it, 20 competitive live clips of it of the best guys hitting it, and then showing them the explanation after resulted in a very high transfer. They seem to really get it. There's only 5 people there, I think. So I think we're going to start doing that once or twice a week. I think that'll be really fruitful, but it is quite labor intensive for me, so I can't do it like every day. Because it take a long time.
That's the poor man's John Danaher. When Joe Rogan's like, you need a guy that just sits at his house and doesn't like women and studies shit. Like, that's kind of you, Lee, and a poor man.
Yeah. I always tell people in the gym, like, don't try to be like me. I ruin every relationship. I have no friends. I eat like shit, but I love jiu-jitsu. I got that going for me.
I say that lovingly, but like I do that as much as I possibly can myself. It's just, other life factors kind of get in the way. But like as you're talking about it, it's like, man, I wish I had more time to study this, and I wish I had more time to find these clips and pair it together and make it all make sense. And like, look, this is why. It's the same thing. Like what you're doing is you're giving the example of this is why we do it, right? And the best that I can do with the time given with my students or the people that I'm training with is after I teach a move, I try and hit it on them, and I'll be like, see, it works. And so like that's the payoff, is that you can see the example in use, and that's what you're doing by going and finding these clips, and I appreciate that. So like when I say that, it's sort of jokingly, I just wish it was me and somebody was calling me the nerd and not you.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I write a lot for my major, and the lectures are actually pretty light. So I'll put in 2 or 3 days of like manic hammering away writing, and then it frees up a lot of jiu-jitsu time. So it's good.
No, it's all. And here's the like one other thing that I'm thinking, which is beautiful, is I would like it if the 3 of us on this podcast, and it's up to you guys if we actually make this come to fruition, but like just come up with just a simple like Word document that we think would be helpful for, i.e., either new people, like, hey, let's get this down, and we have like a little outline, and or something else, right? If you guys are into it, you don't have to. Obviously, we're all friends, but we're all kind of like on separate teams a little bit. But I think it would be helpful, because I think the bottom line is all of us on here are trying to make our people better, right? And then in turn make ourselves better. Like the better we make the people at our gyms, the better that we get, right? And I think if we came up with a comprehensive outline in general, and this is why I'm thinking of it, just for a quick context, is I don't know, Lee, probably not you, but maybe Gary, but years ago, this might have been early 2000s. Everything seems like yesterday to me, but Lloyd Irvin came out with this thing, and I think it was called the Grappler's Guide, which now is like a website and other shit, right? Like, so that's where the Grappler's Guide gets confusing, right? But he came up with it first, and you bought this thing, and I bought it. And it was like, hey, buy this Grappler's Guide. And the reason was he had a guy named Mike Flowers, I think, and more, and they all got their black belt within 3 and 3.5 years. And I don't know, you mentioned it earlier. I think Keaton was part of this group, and a lot of these guys were part of this group that were all getting these black belts early, right? And initially everybody gave them shit, but then those guys went to competition and beat people, right? And so kind of the same reason people don't like Lloyd is, you know, I like, there's some other stuff, I guess, with that whole stuff, but was the marketing thing. He signed up with a marketing team, right? And that got a little bit crazy because there was like shooting you stuff. And I was one of the people that bought this Ultimate Grappler's Guide thing, right? And honestly, it was a waste of money. I think I paid $200 for this thing, and all it did was say everything that we just said on this podcast. It was like, take notes, but it essentially had a notebook, and it laid this stuff out, like on how to take a note, and it came with an audio portion. All of it was a waste of time for me, to be honest. And I'm not knocking on Lloyd, because it honestly is everything that we're talking about. So somebody could listen to this podcast also and say it's a waste of time, right? But it was like, I'm just going to lay a lot of it out. It was just like, hey, like if somebody has a really good guard and they're your training partner, go up to them and say, hey, you have a really good guard. I really admire your triangle. Can I roll with you? And he was like saying how that disarmed them and made them a nicer person. And then you made a good training partner, and then you learn triangles. Go ahead, Gary. I'm sorry.
It's funny. But all of this is kind of perfectly situated because they're online printing things. And I just had a couple dozen jiu-jitsu journals specific for our team. And it kind of like outlines the techniques that are blue belt techniques or whatever, but it has a spot for you to track your training, a spot for you to track your seminars, take notes, because I talk about it all the time, but I don't have anything available for them as a resource to use, right? And to record. And you know, sometimes you have to put it in front of their face before they use it. I've said just about every class how important it is to take notes, and then still nobody shows up with a notebook. So yeah, I figure if I put the journal in front of them, that they'll go ahead, maybe they'll take it, and that's what will change it for them, and maybe they'll use it. But like it like every lesson has a spot after it for you to take notes. Maybe I say something that isn't in the outline of, you know, whatever the technique is, whether it be a trap and roll. Maybe there's something I say when I teach the move that's the word that makes sense to them, and they can write it down, and it can change everything, the meaning of everything else in those notes, right? And so, and then on top of that, there's going to be a journal in the back where they can record their training, they can record seminars, stuff they learn at seminars. So I can share that with you guys if you want. But really all it really is just a jiu-jitsu journal. It's a way of you to journal your where your successes are, your faults are, what you need to work on, what you're having success with.
No, I think, and that's perfect, because I think even if you have, any of us have that outline, again, and I wasn't talking shit about Lloyd, I'm just saying that's what it was. And I was disappointed because I thought he was giving me the secrets. The secrets were, the work's on you, right? You have to do the work, right? And I was unhappy with that answer. It's just like when you want to lose weight, I want you to give me a magic pill so I lose weight. I don't want to buy a book that says, hey, guess what? Calories in is calories out. If you take less calories in and you work out, you're going to lose weight. I'm like, well, that's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted you to tell me that I could take this pill and I'd lose 20 fucking pounds, right? And that's the same with jiu-jitsu. Like, right, I was hoping Lloyd was going to give me a secret sauce, and Lloyd gave me literally everything that we're saying right now. So my point is, I think we're all on the right track, and nobody's going to get the magic answer. But I think what we could do as instructors and as people that genuinely care about the people that are in our gyms is collaborate and try to come up with a system to try to help people. So rather, that's what you got already, Gary, which is great. And then maybe Lee put some stuff that he's like, hey, I do this. And then it doesn't matter if we all agree with each other, because we're not going to. We're all like, that's the point of being humans, right? We're gonna be like, because my guard is probably different than yours. Like I'm a tall, you know, like Lee and I are built the same, but we're not built as you, Gary, right? Like we're probably gonna have some different ideals, you know, like, and that's fine, but we could make it. And again, you don't have to, but I would love it if the three of us collaborate and come up with something to just make jiu-jitsu better in our states, you know, West Virginia and North Carolina. And not everybody's going to follow what we do, but the people that do, I think that would be great. And if you guys are into it, that'd be great. And if not, obviously Gary and I are going to do it because we like each other, Lee, and you may not like us, but that's okay. You know what I'm saying? But like, I think I got one guy that's in on it, but I think, again, that's what I'm saying. That's what this podcast is about. Like, I truly care about everybody. I do, like if you're giving me money to learn jujitsu, I care, because like, I joke about it all the time. Like, if you get in a fight, in a street fight, and you lose, ask for your fucking money back, man. Literally, because like, I failed, right? Like, if you lose to somebody that doesn't train, like, man, we made a major problem, right? Like, it's my fault. Like, that shouldn't happen. That's my fault. It's kind of a joke, but it's serious, right? Like, and that means I'm doing bad, but I want to make the best people that I can make. And I know you do, and I know, I know you do, Lee, and I know you do, Gary. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't care. Like, we're starting here, but I could collaborate with everybody in the fucking world. I don't care. That's what I want to do. I want to make the best people I can make. Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I would be down for that. That does seem a bit overwhelming at the moment. Basically, my whole answer to jiu-jitsu is acquire John Danaher DVDs and watch them and wait 3 months to understand them, which is not super helpful.
It's not that bad though. Here's the other thing I want to say, like, not to cut you off, but like, we talked about this gym the other day, because Gordon did a good job of saying, hey, if you don't buy these right now, the price is going up. So guess what? Everybody in the gym bought his DVD. He did a great job. Like, he did everything. But everybody, including myself, I'm guilty, so I'm not making fun of anybody. They bitch about the price. Let's say it's $200. But it is, like, this is what you're talking. It's 10 hours of instruction. 10 hours. Like, that is a bargain. I know we bitch about, I complain about 99-cent apps on Apple, and I don't buy them because I'm cheap as shit. But like, when you really break it down, like, it's such a deal. Because I would pay, from Gordon Ryan, let's say he charged $250 an hour for privates. I don't know what he charges, but let's say that's kind of a going, like, my instructor, Marcel Montero, charges $250, right? Like, but typically, if I took that, I'm learning like 1 or 2 really key major problems, but I'm not getting 10 hours of instruction that I have on tape that I can watch for the rest of my life. That is honestly like a great deal. And I'm saying that because I'm guilty of not buying them either. Like, I'm hoping, I'm hoping somebody buys them and pirates them for me. Just joking, but I am kind of.
Guy.
Exactly.
But yeah, I don't know how much you guys do privates, but they're only like really useful for a small select portion of people. I feel like really the only way a private is worth it, like a private from Lee Keaton is worth it, is if I give you like 6 weeks of what to work on in the actual sessions after. Like, I show up with papers, like a full
comprehensive plan, right? Yes.
That may be worth it, but I don't think, man, privates are just a little bit of a scam, I feel like.
Yeah, and for that point, they're and I talk white belts out of them all the time, because I think initially people are scared to be in a group because they suck, right? And that's essentially what they're telling me without telling me that, right? They're like, well, I need to do this before I do this, and I tell them, no, privates are more for a purple or brown belt that's got a sticking point that they can't get by. And maybe I've got the answer and we need this hour, but almost in general, and I'm sure you guys are the same, I'm going to give you the answer without taking a private. I'm not that guy that says time is money. Like, buy a private, and I'm going to tell you right now, right? Doesn't mean that you can't take a private, and I've taught them, and there's a reason for those things. But in general, if you're new, no need to take a freaking private. Like, everybody in the gym can help you with the questions you've got. Every single person, right? I think we all agree.
I think Lee may have froze up on us.
His face looks the same in those pictures.
He's not moving.
Yeah.
Blink if you're in danger, Lee.
His voice is still working though.
Sorry, I was cutting out for a second.
No, I think that is true. As far as privates go, it's for sticking points for competitors. Not that you can't. I think you can learn a little bit quicker if you're taking private lessons. As far as like the standard basic stuff as a white belt, but it's not it's not exponential growth, it's just slightly faster.
It's your Demi Lovato, right? And
Yeah, if
just,
you got like fuck you money, then
just to
it's
circle
fine.
back
Yeah.
to the whole thing, right? Like just to mess with it, right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a good. I've got to go, guys. So not
No,
to
you're
cut this
pushing.
short, but
Oh,
I think it's
sorry.
also good. That's okay. It's 10:30 and I've got to go to work tomorrow. So, but no, I think this is a good place to stop because it really is like we are just trying to give you the best jujitsu for your money, right? And I I know for Butch, for me, I'm assuming for you, it sounds like you love jujitsu and you love the people that you train with, and it's hard to ask them for extra. You know, it's hard to ask them for extra to do that. For me, it's just that I do this because I love it. You know, I'm not making any money doing jujitsu. There's no financial rainbow at the end of this. I still have to go work my regular 9 to 5, but I do this because I love it and I just want to make people better. And I think that's what we're all here to do.
Yep, agreed.
How do we find you, Lee? And how do we, if we want to train with you, or where do we find you at? Oh no, he's frozen again.
Until he's there you go. You're unfrozen. There you go. Sorry.
Okay, here I am. I'm back. Yeah, the best place to reach me is honestly my Instagram at Lee Keaton, LeeKeaton JJ Jiu-Jitsu. If anybody listening to this is around the area and you're not one of my select arch nemesis, come by and train. Pretty simple. We have a waiver. Our night sessions 6:30 Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 7 p.m. Tuesday, Thursday. I would love to have somebody drop in from this. That would be super cool. Yeah.
I would mention too, you know, Lee's in town sometimes. He lives about an hour from me in Spencer sometimes, right? Like it's your original place. But you know, I mentioned that because if you're listening to this and you want to train with him at our gym, there's times that you can do that. You don't have to drive all the way to Morgantown. So if he's in town, he's more than willing to. Every time that Lee is in town, he always messages me and asks if he wants to, if I want to help or let him teach class, which I usually jump on the opportunity. But anything, guys, like Lee has a wealth of information, but besides the information, it's a systematic approach on how to train and make yourself better, which I think is important. It's outside of this podcast. I feel like he could really help you individually. This is a generalized approach. But Lee, I can just tell the way that he talks is that he could talk to you probably in 5 or 10 minutes and figure out what you need and how you need to get better and really help you. There's very few people that I've met in this world that I truly value as much as I do Lee. As far back as him being a white belt, I spoke, you know, highly in leaps and bounds of you, Lee, as you know, and made posts about you. And I told people at the gym, like, watch that white belt because he'll fuck you up. Like, so like, I'm a big fan. I've always been, and that's why we're on here now. But you know, just so you know, like, you know, I'm to watch you. You're gonna be. You already are, but you're going to be great. You're great now, but you're going to make a mark on West Virginia, I think, more than most of us, and that's a big thing. You know, you've got guys like Ashley Lockwood and Don Cunanan and Phil and on and on and on, right? Like Jeb Tonkin. I you know, I'm not going to leave her, but yeah, there's a mess of people, and I think at some point Lee's going to be the best well-known guy, and the reason is because there's one thing about being good at jiu-jitsu, but there's another thing about conveying the thing. And I think that with Lee's unique training and student of education, he's the John Danaher of West Virginia. Look at that. Yes. So I'm saying it right now. So
thanks. I'll put that in my Insta bio as my nickname. No, thank you, Butch. I really appreciate that, man. And oh man, I'm so glad when I'm back home to be able to train with you guys. I was I've only had one summer where I lived back home, but I was working like a horrible night shift job. And I would drive to your place, not sleep between training and work, and then work from midnight to 8. And I still,
No, there he goes again.
so thank you a lot.
Well, we appreciate you. I mean, honestly, yeah, I can't say enough. This is just like a big homosexual session at the end, but it's okay because I love you, and everything that you did is super important to us. So now Gary got to meet. I don't think Gary met you before, but
I've seen. I know Lee from competitions. I've seen you at the WVGOs before, and so I knew who he was. Obviously I've seen him on Facebook and know his training. This is the first time I've actually got to sit down and talk to you, and so I appreciate that, man. And I'm excited to see where you go and what you do. You know, I think with that you are in the right spot, the right age, the right time of your life, and you have the right hunger for it to go far. So everything that Butch is saying right now makes sense. You have it all at you. It's and I think just as much as anybody else, it's kind of up to what you do with it. And so I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, thanks, man. But yeah, we took 2 hours and 15 minutes to say, take some notes, watch some instructionals, and go to practice. So do those 3 things. But in all seriousness, if you're like a white belt training anywhere listening to this and you're like anxious about contacting me or something, I'm nobody. Like, just DM me on Instagram with whatever problem you're having. I love talking jiu-jitsu. I'd be glad to interact in that way. But last thought, set up like long-term projects for yourself to address weaknesses. Maybe read a book or 2 on development. I really like this book called The Inner Game of Tennis. It doesn't sound like it would be super helpful to jiu-jitsu, but it's very good. It's mainly on not analyzing technique as good or bad, just like as it is. And I think that's something a lot of people need to hear regarding their jiu-jitsu. So thank you guys. This was a lot of fun.
It's a blast to have you here, man. I appreciate you. And again, guys, go seek out Lee. He definitely knows what he's talking about. Butch, another rest round done. I love you, brother. And I'll talk to you soon.
All right, guys, have a great night, and we'll see you soon.
Peace out.
Later.